So he's in charge of a whole army group now, huh? Yeah, I mean, that's real responsibility. Well, yeah, but he has other stuff going on. Well, no, remind me. Reichsführer SS, commander of the replacement army, national police chief, minister of the interior. Wait, that's a lot. Does he have time to run an army group as well? Yeah, who knows is right. All right, I'll see you. February 3rd, 1945. They've been advancing across Poland, across the Baltics, across Hungary, advancing ever closer to Germany, to Berlin. This week, the Soviet advance through Poland reaches the German border in heavy force. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week, the Allies kept up the fight to eliminate the Colmar Pocket in Alsace. They cleared the Ruhr Triangle further north and advanced in the Ardennes. On Luzon, the American advance continued, and in Burma, the Allies had big success on the Arakan Peninsula and also reopened the Burma Road. What the world was focused on, though, were the big Soviet advances in East Prussia, Western Poland, and indeed, at the German border. The Germans seemed to be withdrawing or being pushed back everywhere. As January ends, so too does Operation Nordlicht after several months. This is the withdrawal of German 20th Mountain Army from Finland to Norway. They've been fortunate in a couple ways. For one, the Arctic winter took its time arriving, but also they've been doing this at a time when the Soviets are very much busy elsewhere. So they don't do much to stop it, and the Western Allies do nothing at all. And very busy the Soviets sure are this week. After Memel fell at the end of last week to 1st Baltic Front, its garrison pulled back to north of Königsberg in East Prussia. Ivan Cherniakovsky's 3rd Belarusian Front has been grinding its way west through East Prussia towards Königsberg, except for his left, which is headed through the Masurian Lake District, taking Rastenburg, Hitler's old headquarters. It seems like Königsberg won't be able to hold out, especially once 43rd Army surrounds the city from the north and takes Kranz and cuts it off from Samland and Pilau. And 11th Guards Army cuts the road between the city and the Germans south of the Vistula Lagoon. But then 11th Guards' left flank is hit hard, and suddenly the Germans have a long, skinny pocket from Königsberg on down, like 60 kilometers long and max 20 wide, but mostly narrower, that contains parts of 23 divisions. They also have west of the city, but cut off from it by the Soviets, Group Samland, 9 divisions strong, with the former Memel garrison now in Pilau, and Königsberg now seems a lot more secure, at least for the time being. Lothar Rendulic has replaced Friedrich Hossbach as German 4th Army commander by now. And it is a change in style, that's for sure. Rendulic was setting out to carve for himself a niche in history next to Schörner. For him, keeping the army group in East Prussia raised no questions other than how it could best be accomplished. In one order, he made the battalion and regimental commanders responsible for every foot of ground voluntarily given up, and appended the example of a captain he had ordered shot the day before for taking his battalion back a mile after it had been broken through. In another, he ordered flying court-martials created to scour the rear areas. Every soldier not wounded picked up outside his unit area was to be tried and shot on the spot. As for the fighting to the southwest, Georgy Zhukov's 1st Belarusian Front is still advancing as the week begins, having bypassed the fortress city of Poznan and its 60,000-man garrison in well-prepared positions. His right flank is heading into German Pomerania, and his center, Semyon Bogdanov's 2nd Guards Tank Army and Nikolai Berzarin's 5th Shock Army, grinds its way to the Oder. A battle group from 5th Shark Army. Oh, that'd be cool, yeah. Shark Army. When we have an army, it's going to be Shark. Is it a Shock Army? It's a Shark Army. A battle group from 5th Shock Army forces the river early the morning of the 31st, and over that day and the next, 1st Belarusian Front reaches it on a broad front. It seems like Frankfurt on the Oder is within striking distance, but by now, many Soviet units are running out of fuel and ammunition. 11th Guards Tank Corps and 4th Guards Corps do begin their assaults over the river the second half of the week, but thin ice, a lack of good bridging equipment, and the Luftwaffe appearing in the skies, oh yes, hinder any major attempts to cross. Today, a bunch of Soviet AA guns arrive on the scene, and that keeps the planes away, but without heavy bridging equipment, the tanks and big guns remain east of the Oder. So they halt to regroup and to try to eliminate the many pockets of resistance they have bypassed. The lack of firm ice and the quick river current is slowing Ivan Konyev's first Ukrainian front to the southeast, even though by the end of January he has 5 armies on or across the river. But his left wing, which has had the job of clearing the Silesian industrial area, finishes the job the 29th. They've had help from their left wing, Ivan Petrov's 4th Ukrainian Front. Here's the thing though, the Germans in the area fall back southwest towards the Oder, exactly as Konyev has planned. And Pavel Rybalko's tanks just eat them up. Only around 30,000 of 100,000 men escape Konyev's Silesian trap. His focus shifts then to his right and a redeployment north of Breslau, which is close to Zhukov's front. Tattered though the German divisions had become, Konyev's assault armies were also severely worn down. Lelyushenko had outpaced his supply and was running short on fuel and ammunition, with airdrops scarcely making up for the shortfall. But the bridgehead at Steinau held, and in spite of furious German resistance at Brieg, a large consolidated bridgehead 50 miles long and 15 deep was built up south of Breslau. Breslau itself, however, set about manning its elderly forts and improvised anti-tank defenses, transforming itself into a fortress of astonishing resilience and extraordinary tenacity. Well, the main object in both Zhukov's and Konyev's minds is Berlin, of course. Zhukov's salient now pokes towards it into Germany, and already January 26, he submitted plans for an offensive to take it. First, to reach the Berlinchen-Landsberg-Graz line, concentrate force there, bring up the armor, and then explode across the Oder and make for Berlin. Konyev's plan calls for crushing the Germans at Breslau and then making for the Elbe, which they'd reach by February 25th. From there, his right flank would work together with Zhukov to take Berlin, and his left would head for Dresden, and hopefully have Petrov's front to assist. Zhukov's plan was approved January 27th, and Konyev's the 29th. For all the forthrightness of these decisions, a certain confusion began to prevail both within the front commands and at the center. There were unmistakable signs that the Stavka was no longer entirely abreast of the pace and extent of the Soviet advance. Konyev's first Ukrainian front had speedily outstripped its Stavka directive, while Zhukov's front was almost 5 days ahead of schedule. Yet no great thought seems to have been given to re-examining rates of advance and possible objectives. As they outran Stavka directive, so also were Soviet armies overreaching themselves in terms of supplies of fuel and ammunitions. But more than just that, Zhukov's front is now stretched over 500 kilometers, and Konstantin Rokossovsky's second Belarusian front's left is falling further and further behind Zhukov's right. So, how is Zhukov supposed to guard his flank when all his armies are focused on Berlin? And Soviet command has a paradox too. They have designated Zhukov, and only Zhukov, as the victor of Berlin. But Konyev is supposed to also attack the city? Well, how does that work? The gap between 1st and 2nd Belarusian fronts grows larger each day, but Stavka has not given any orders or said anything about reinforcements. And German resistance on the Oder is in fact growing, as it is in East Pomerania. Zhukov issues a brief to all his commanders in 2 sections. The first is about the Germans, that the forces opposing him cannot mount a counterattack, that they are, though, bringing over divisions from the Western Front to defend the approaches to Berlin, and that they're probably going to deploy forces in the next few days to cover Pomerania and try to prevent the Soviets from taking Stettin and reaching the bay. The second section says that from yesterday to the 8th, the front is to consolidate and resupply for a lightning assault that will take Berlin by February 15th or 16th. The front must be in full readiness by the 9th and 10th. Many of his and Konev's divisions, though, are down to 4,000 or so men, and Stavka is now worried about the gaps, the flanks, the enemy reinforcements, so Stavka is really recalculating. Their appreciation pointed to the growing Soviet disadvantage in the balance of forces, the lack of adequate air support, the growing shortage of military munitions, and the danger to the flanks emanating from East Pomerania and Silesia. Removing the threat from the flanks was manifestly beyond the resources of 1st Belarusian Front alone and necessitated a new design involving 3 fronts: 1st Belarusian, 2nd Belarusian, and 1st Ukrainian. Whatever the inclination of front and army commanders, the center, which in the person of Stalin was all-powerful, took a simple but forthright motto for itself: no risks. Zhukov does not yet know it, but he will not be making that lightning thrust towards Berlin. Not right away, at any rate. I mentioned last week that Heinrich Himmler is now commander of the newly created German army group Vistula. It is they who are to defend in that gap between 1st and 2nd Belarusian fronts. Heinz Guderian had suggested bringing up Max von Weiss from Yugoslavia to run Vistula, but Adolf Hitler wants Himmler. Himmler has lately been in command of what was Oberkommando Oberrhein, the Upper Rhine High Command in the West, and it became Army Group Upper Rhine last week on the 22nd with Paul Hauser in charge. He was then sent to Army Group G the 25th, and Army Group Upper Rhine is dissolved the 29th, with the units responsible for that area also going to Army Group G. The point of the Oberkommando was during the Ardennes and Nordwind offensives, when it was an entity responsible to OKW directly and not OB West. Well, Himmler now has the job of closing the gap between Army Groups A and Center and holding open a corridor between them. Wait, they've been renamed. Sorry. So, between the current Army Group Center and North. Got it? Yep. Even when he arrived on the scene last week, that was obsolete though, for Army Group North was cut off. He arrived in his personal train, Steiermark, and it does have a command post. Okay, Himmler wears a lot of hats, right? And he has a staff for each of his posts with him there. Reichsführer SS, Minister of the Interior, National Police Chief, Commander of the Replacement Army, and now Commander of an Army Group. Each of the staffs had its own clerks and files. The train was outfitted with radio and teletype, but the sets, fully occupied with administrative traffic, could not also carry that of an Army Group command. Himmler, moreover, would not have neglected his political interests for the sake of an Army Group. As an Army Group commander, he had nothing. No communications with his frontline units, no staff, virtually no troops, and no vehicles. For several days on his island of luxury, which contrasted grotesquely with the columns of refugees wandering through the snow and cold outside, he had no more contact with the war than he could get from occasional, mostly outdated situation reports. Several days later, the Chief of Staff, an SS general with no staff experience, arrived. Himmler does have what he calls a gift of fate this week, though. The week begins with a blizzard and high snowdrifts on the roads, but from February 1st, the temperatures go up sharply, melting the snow and softening the ground. Himmler writes to Guderian that day, "In the present stage of the war, the thawing weather is for us a gift of fate. God has not forgotten the courageous German people." And by the end of the week, the Soviet offensive is certainly slowing down, and Army Group Vistula even has a reasonably coherent front. As for the offensives and counteroffensives in Hungary, last week, 4th SS Panzer Corps was on a bit of a rampage, splitting Fyodor Tolbukhin's 3rd Ukrainian front in half. Tolbukhin then spent the latter part of the week building up armor for a big counterattack. On the 27th, when the week ended, they attacked, hitting 4th SS Panzers from the southeast. Hitler has ordered Operation Conrad III, the latest relief operation towards Budapest, aborted, and the Panzers withdrew from their salient already the 28th. The fighting over the rest of this week sees small, gradual Soviet advances taking town after town. The Allies are still advancing in Alsace this week. Operation Cheerful continues, and the Americans reached the Colmar Canal the night of January 29th. German Army Group G, now under Hauser, as I said, has already realized the Colmar Pocket cannot hold out much longer, and they should withdraw the forces in it back over the Rhine to defend the Black Forest. Hitler does not entirely disagree with this for once, but only agrees to pull out the forces in the north. German 19th Army Commander Siegfried Rasp begins pulling units from the Vosges the 1st, sort of hoping that he'll get permission to bring everyone across the Rhine while there's still time. The weakness of the units within the pocket prevented Rasp from creating a plausible defense against the Franco-American offensive, which was steadily gaining strength from the addition of units from the Ardennes and Haguenau sector. Allied Supreme Commander Dwight Eisenhower has committed U.S. 22nd Corps to the attacks.
No, 21st Corps.
Okay, not 22nd Corps. 21st Corps. Allied Supreme Commander Dwight Eisenhower has committed U.S. 21st Corps to the attacks. So there are now 4 American and 8 French divisions here, which gives the Allies a 5-to-1 advantage in tanks, artillery, and men. Rasp then gets orders from Hitler to hold fast. The French and Americans hit Colmar II, U.S. 28th Division clearing the outskirts, and the French armor entering and liberating the town. The drive to liberate Luzon in the Philippines also continues this week. Busy week. The 3 divisions of U.S. 1st Corps, 43rd, 6th, and 25th, complete their assignments on the 29th and 30th, securing the flank of the American landings so there are no nasty surprises from that direction, while 14th Corps drives south for Manila. 6th Division on 1st Corps' right then heads south, doing recon on Muñoz and Cabanatuan, seeing no Japanese west of the highway. So 14th Corps' left flank is safe, and their right can focus on defeating the Kembu group that dominates the Clark airfields. Still, on the 30th, U.S. 6th Army Commander Walter Kruger orders 1st Corps to capture San Jose City before joining the run from Manila, since he thinks any enemy attack from there too has the potential of hitting 14th Corps' flanks. This city is actually Japanese Commander Tomoyuki Yamashita's storage and shipping base between Manila and the Shobu group in the northern mountains. It seems somewhat hard to believe that Kruger, who had served in the Philippines, did not also have in mind the opportunity of cutting Yamashita's supply route and securing a major passageway into the northern mountains for later use. The battle begins the 1st, with 25th and 6th Divisions converging on San Jose. It ends as the week does, and a little bit weirdly. See, all the troops and all the supplies that the Shobu group needs from southern Luzon have already passed through by today. So Yamashita no longer needs to protect the route, and he just withdraws. So when the Americans do enter San Jose, it is empty of the enemy. Now, on the 29th, U.S. 11th Corps lands at San Antonio, north of Subic Bay. 30,000 men come ashore this day. They are to cross the neck of Bataan Peninsula and clear it of the Japanese. On the 31st, 2 regiments from 11th Airborne are landed near Nasugbu, southwest of Manila. As for 37th and 40th Divisions from 14th Corps, tasked with taking Clark Airfield and Fort Stotzenburg, this they do by the end of the 31st. 37th Division is then withdrawn. 40th will remain to contain things here, and 37th and 1st Cavalry are to attack Manila. So the second half of the week, 37th Infantry and 1st Cavalry Divisions are racing for the city in 2 columns of vehicles flying down the highway. 1st Cavalry beats 37th by half a day. They move faster than the Japanese can be ready for them, crossing bridges before they can be blown. And this evening, just after 8:30, 5 tanks break through the fence of Santo Tomas University, a Japanese prison camp holding close to 4,000 mainly British and American prisoners. The Japanese there take hostages and withdraw into the 3-story education building. The fight for Manila begins as next week does. The U.S. Third Fleet has been at anchor at Ulithi after supporting the Philippine landing operations. Last week, On the 26th, its commander Bull Halsey had this to say: "We have driven the enemy off the sea and back to his inner defenses. Superlatively well done." Halsey's command is transferred to Spruance as the 3rd Fleet is again subordinated to, or as, the 5th for operations to next establish advanced bases in places like Bonin and Ryukyu Islands for an invasion of Japan. Spruance and Halsey have alternated command of the overall fleet, which allows one to prepare future operations while the other is running current ones. The Japanese have also been confused into thinking the 3rd and 5th are completely separate entities because of their names, which is another bonus. The island of Iwo Jima is about halfway between the Marianas and Tokyo. Now, at a conference at Saipan the 28th, during Spruance's journey to take command of the fleet, Air Force General Curtis LeMay tells him that without Iwo Jima, I couldn't bomb Japan effectively. LeMay has been sent in by Air Forces Commander Hap Arnold to hopefully improve the results of the 21st Bombardment Group. They've been raiding Japan for over 3 months now with Superfortress bombers with less than stellar results. You can learn all about the bombing campaigns of the war on our War Against Humanity series, so check that out. One issue the superfortresses have been having is enemy fighters swarming up from Iwo Jima and wrecking their formations. They also give Tokyo early warnings about raids. So LeMay wants to neutralize Iwo Jima first, and then use it for refueling and emergency landings. Spruance is happy about this because it gives a real justification for what he anticipates to be a bloody battle with high casualties for Iwo Jima. The bombing of Germany is also covered in War Against Humanity, but there are a few developments I'll mention here just now. The Allies dropped the M47 100-pound phosphorus bombs for the first time in late January. U.S. Assistant Secretary of War Robert Lovett has this to say about those bombs: "If we're going to have a total war, we might as well make it as horrible as possible." Schaeff, however, issues a list of German monuments and historic sites to preserve. They have their work cut out for them, it seems, for as an American corporal writes, thanks to the Allied air forces, most of Europe resembles Stonehenge more than anything else. Berlin, Big B, is targeted again this week. It hasn't been for a couple months now. Pro-civilian bombing advocates like Arthur Harris believe they can ruin morale and terrorize the enemy into surrender. Other guys like Jim Doolittle say the odds of terrorizing people who've been regularly bombed for 3 years into submission are remote. Flight crews do not want to hit Berlin either. It is, after all, the most heavily defended city in Europe against air attack. But today the 3rd comes Operation Thunderclap, which drops 2,279 tons of bombs on Berlin, the single heaviest raid of the war so far. The Allies lose 24 B-17s and render 120,000 people homeless. They claim a death toll of 25,000, but this will later be reduced to 2,893, with 2,000 more injured. February will see more such operations over Germany. February will also likely see some real operations over in Burma, on land, as the Allied forces slowly get into position to execute their plans. 4th Corps is advancing against fairly light opposition, taking Pauk the 28th. Today, the 3rd, Corps Commander Frank Messervy orders an attack on Pakoku, with diversions at Chauk and Pagan. 4th is planning to cross in force and hit Meiktila, and Montague Stopford's 33rd Corps is assembling to the north opposite Mandalay and are to keep the Japanese focus up there. Neither of the corps are crossing in force yet. More on this next week, for this week is over. With the Americans nearly at Manila, the Soviets nearly at Königsberg, the French in Colmar, and Zhukov and Konev at the Oder, but uncertainty about how things will proceed along the path to Berlin. Also, on February 1st, Ecuador declares war on Germany and Japan, and on January 30th, the Malta Conference begins. This is Winston Churchill and the combined chiefs of staff discussing what it means now that the Soviets control most of Eastern Europe. Franklin Roosevelt joins them the 2nd, and then they head to Yalta for a conference there next week, which will of course receive plenty of coverage. What does it mean with the Soviets having overrun most of Eastern Europe? Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, big chunks of Yugoslavia and Hungary. Well, I'm sure we'll learn more about that at Yalta, but this week we do see the Soviets slow down, and Stalin, as I said, does not want to take any risks. The Western Allies are further away from Berlin at the moment, sure, but who knows what the defenses of Germany proper are like? We haven't really seen yet. Will the Soviets overrun Germany as well before the Allies can make a big dent? Only time will tell, so stay right here to find out. Mentioning Malta and Yalta got me thinking about other earlier Allied war conferences. We did a Time Ghost newsflash the other year about the close of the Trident Conference, the third Washington Conference. And you can check that out and the plans that were made and whether and how they were executed right here. And you can join the Time Ghost Army for more episodes, series, and news flashes at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. It is the Army that finances all of our productions. This week's Army member is Army Member of the Week, This week's Army Member of the Week is Byron Pardue. And these are the newest commissioned officers. Do not forget to subscribe. See you next time.